The rain that fell on coastal Connecticut in the autumn of 1948 was a rain of wealth. It washed the salt from the air and polished the slate roofs of the sprawling seaside mansions. If our mission to keep these memories alive resonates with you, please consider subscribing to our channel. It's the best way to ensure you never miss a story. And if you already stand with Marcus, leave a "Stay strong, Marcus" in the comments below. For Marcus Thorne, late of the US. Me, the rain was just cold and wet. It soaked through the thin wool of his only suit, a garment that was already worn shiny at the elbows, and plastered his hair to his scalp as he walked the 4 miles back to his rented room in the town's small, segregated boarding house. Another failed job interview lay behind him. The man at the shipping office had been polite, but his eyes had held a familiar, dismissive glaze. A decorated veteran, a man who had led a platoon through the hell of the Pacific campaign, was of no use to him. What he needed, his eyes had said without speaking the words, was a man with a different color of skin. Marcus wasn't bitter. Bitterness was a luxury, a fire that consumed precious energy he did not have. He was just tired. Tired of the rain, tired of the polite rejections, tired of the gnawing, ever-present reality that the country he had fought for did not seem to have a place for him. He was walking along a winding 2-lane road that hugged the coastline, a road flanked by ancient stone walls that hid the estates of the unimaginably rich from public view. The rain was coming down in sheets now, blurring the world into a palette of grays and greens. It was the screech of tires that he heard first, a high, terrifying sound that cut through the drumming of the rain. It was followed by the sickening crunch of metal on stone, and then a sudden, ominous silence. Marcus broke into a run, his worn dress shoes slipping on the wet asphalt. He rounded a sharp, blind curve and saw it. A car, a long, black, impossibly elegant Bentley, had skidded on the wet leaves, slammed into one of the massive stone walls, and was now teetering precariously on the edge of a steep, wooded ravine. The front end was mangled, steam hissing from the crumpled hood. But that wasn't the worst of it. A small, hungry flicker of orange was licking at the undercarriage of the vehicle, fed by a spreading pool of gasoline. His soldier's instincts took over, a cold, clear-headed calm that pushed aside the weariness and the rain. He sprinted toward the wreck. The chauffeur was slumped over the wheel, motionless, a dark stain spreading on the collar of his white shirt. But in the back, behind the thick glass partition, he saw movement. 2 small, pale faces pressed against the window. Children, a boy and a girl, no older than 10 and 8. Their eyes wide with a terror so profound it had rendered them silent. The back door on his side was jammed against the stone wall. The other door, the one hanging over the ravine, was their only way out. The flames were growing, crawling up the side of the car with a hungry, crackling sound. He had seconds, not minutes. He ran to the passenger side, his feet sinking into the soft, muddy shoulder of the road. The drop into the ravine was sheer, a 30-foot fall into a tangle of rocks and trees. The car groaned, shifting its weight, the metal complaining as it settled. He wrenched at the door handle, but it was bent, useless. "Stand back!" he yelled, his voice a powerful, commanding roar that seemed to momentarily break the children's paralysis. They scrambled to the far side of the back seat. Marcus took off his suit jacket, wrapped it around his fist, and with a grunt of effort, smashed the thick safety glass of the rear window. It shattered with a loud pop, shards flying into the rain. He cleared the remaining glass from the frame with his wrapped hand, ignoring the sharp sting as a few rogue pieces cut through the wool. "Come on!" he shouted. "Give me your hand." The little girl, her face streaked with tears, reached for him. He grabbed her small, trembling hand, his grip firm and sure. "I've got you," he said, his voice calm, reassuring. "You're going to be okay. I need you to climb out. I won't let you fall." He pulled her through the window, her small, light body surprisingly easy to lift. He set her down on the muddy ground a safe distance away. "Stay here. Don't move." The fire was roaring now, the heat intense. He turned back to the car. "Your turn, son." he said to the boy, who was staring mesmerized at the flames. Now! The boy snapped out of his trance and scrambled toward the window. Marcus pulled him through just as a wave of heat and black smoke billowed from the front of the car. He had them both. He grabbed them, one under each arm, and half dragged, half carried them further up the road, away from the wreck. They were 50 yards away when it happened. A loud, whooshing explosion rocked the air, sending a fireball of orange and black into the grey sky. The Bentley, a masterpiece of British engineering, was now a funeral pyre. Marcus huddled on the side of the road, his body shielding the two children, who were now sobbing uncontrollably, the delayed shock hitting them with full force. He held them, murmuring the same senseless, comforting words he had used on wounded men in the jungles of New Guinea. "It's all right, you're safe now. It's all over." Within minutes, the sound of sirens cut through the rain. A police car and an ambulance arrived, their flashing lights painting the scene in stark, strobing colors of red and blue. A state trooper, a young man with a hard, suspicious face, was the first to approach. He saw the scene, the burning wreck of a fantastically expensive car, two well-dressed, obviously wealthy white children, and a large black man in a shabby, torn suit, his hands and face smudged with soot, his knuckles bleeding. The trooper didn't see a hero. He saw a threat. His hand instinctively went to the holster of his gun. "Step away from the children," he ordered, his voice sharp with suspicion. "It's okay, officer," Marcus said, raising his hand slowly, a gesture he had learned was necessary for survival. "I pulled them from the car. The driver is still inside." The trooper's eyes narrowed, his mind refusing to connect the dots in any way that made sense to him. The paramedics rushed to the children, who were now babbling their story, pointing at Marcus, at the window he had broken, at the fire. The trooper's partner went to check on the chauffeur, his grim shake of the head a moment later confirming the man was gone. The trooper's suspicions slowly, reluctantly began to recede, replaced by a grudging confusion. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone still hard, accusatory. "Marcus Thorne. What were you doing here?" "I was walking," Marcus said simply. The name of the children was discovered from a small, monogrammed tag on the boy's school bag. Sterling. The trooper's face went pale. Even he knew that name. Sterling Shipping. The family was not just wealthy. They were a dynasty, an institution. The local police were practically their private security force. The trooper's entire demeanor shifted. The situation had just escalated from a routine, if tragic, car accident into a major event. They took his information, his address, his statement. Marcus answered their questions with a quiet, weary patience. He had no interest in being a hero. He just wanted to go home, to get out of his wet clothes, to be alone. As soon as they were done with him, he turned and began to walk away, melting back into the rain, leaving the flashing lights and the hushed, important voices behind. He reached his small, damp room an hour later, his body aching, his knuckles throbbing. He stripped off his ruined suit and looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror. He didn't see a hero. He saw a tired man who had just done what any decent human being would have done. He didn't think about a reward. He didn't think about the Sterling family. He only hoped that his name on the police report wouldn't bring him any more trouble than life had already given him. He was wrong. 3 hours later, there was a knock at his door. Not the hesitant knock of his landlady, but a sharp, authoritative rap. He opened it to find a man standing in the narrow, dimly lit hallway. The man was tall and thin, dressed in a chauffeur's uniform so crisp and perfect it seemed to have been created by geometry rather than a tailor. "Mr. Marcus Thorne?" the man asked, his voice a polished, impersonal monotone. "Yes," Marcus said. "My name is Arthur," the man said. "Mrs. Genevieve Sterling requests your presence at the estate immediately." It was not a request. It was a summons, a command, delivered by a uniformed servant. Marcus looked from the immaculate chauffeur to the peeling wallpaper of his own hallway, and he felt a cold, familiar anger. He had saved her children's lives, and her response was not a personal call, not a visit, but an order to be fetched like a piece of luggage. "She has sent a car," Arthur added, gesturing toward the street. Marcus sighed. He knew he had no choice. To refuse would be an act of defiance that a woman like Mrs. Sterling would not tolerate, and he did not need that kind of trouble. He put on his only other pair of trousers and a clean, threadbare shirt. Then he followed the silent chauffeur out into the rain and into a world he had only ever seen from the outside. The silence inside the Sterling automobile was heavier than the rain outside. It was a dense, upholstered silence, the kind that costs a great deal of money to achieve. The car moved through the wet, glistening streets with a silent, effortless glide, a self-contained world completely insulated from the grit and noise of the town Marcus called home. He sat on a leather seat that was softer than any bed he had ever slept in, the smell of the rich, cured hide of foreign, decadent scent. Outside, the rain-swept world of peeling paint, overflowing gutters and struggling storefronts slid by, viewed through a thick, pristine window as if it were a film about someone else's life. The chauffeur, Arthur, did not speak. He drove with a serene, focused economy of motion, his hands in their grey leather gloves resting lightly on the polished wooden steering wheel. He was not a driver. He was a component of the machine, a perfectly calibrated part of the Sterling family's vast and silent apparatus of power. Marcus watched the back of the man's head, the sharp, precise line of his uniform collar, and understood that this man's silence was a language in itself. It was the language of walls, of professional distance, of a world so rigidly ordered that a man like Marcus, a hero of the hour, was not an individual to be engaged with, but a package to be delivered. The anger Marcus had felt at the summons had cooled, replaced by a soldier's watchfulness. He was entering enemy territory, or at the very least, territory that was not his own, and he needed to be alert. He had faced down machine gun nests and hidden snipers. He would not be intimidated by a woman in a big house. But he knew that the weapons of the wealthy were different. They were subtle, quiet, and could inflict wounds far deeper than any bullet. They left the town behind, turning onto the same coastal road where the accident had happened. They passed the spot, now marked by a dark, scorched patch on the asphalt and the raw, fresh scar in the ancient stone wall. 2 state troopers were still there, their car parked on the shoulder, taking notes, preserving the scene of the Sterling family's brief, violent collision with the real world. Arthur did not slow down. He did not even glance at the spot. A few miles further on, he slowed and turned the car toward a set of gates that rose out of the stone wall like a portcullis. They were magnificent, towering structures of black wrought iron, their intricate scrollwork culminating in a single severe S at their apex. The gates swung inward silently, magically, without Arthur having to stop or press a button. Someone, somewhere, was watching. The driveway was a long, serpentine ribbon of crushed white stone that wound its way through a landscape of impossible, manicured perfection. Great, weeping willow trees drooped elegantly over a man-made pond. Vast stretches of lawn, a shade of green so deep it seemed unnatural, rolled away into the misty rain. And then the house came into view. It was not a house, it was a monument, a sprawling 3-story edifice of pale grey stone with dozens of tall, dark windows that looked like vacant eyes. It was built to convey a single, unambiguous message: power. It was not a home built for comfort or for laughter. It was a fortress built to contain a dynasty. Arthur pulled the car to a smooth stop under a massive portico. The front door, a slab of dark carved wood that looked heavy enough to repel a siege, was opened from within by another man in a simple dark uniform, a butler. Arthur opened the car door for Marcus without a word, and Marcus stepped out into the cathedral-like silence of the Sterling estate. He followed the butler into a cavernous entrance hall. The floor was a checkerboard of black and white marble, and his worn, damp shoes squeaked shamefully with every step. The sound echoed up to a ceiling so high he could barely make out the details of the ornate plasterwork. The air was cool and still, and smelled of old paper, beeswax, and money. Huge, dark oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors stared down at him from the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow his progress with silent, patrician disapproval. The butler led him to a set of tall mahogany doors and opened them. "Mrs. Sterling will be with you shortly," he said, his voice as devoid of emotion as the chauffeur's. "Please wait here." Marcus stepped inside, and the doors closed behind him with a soft, final click. He was in a library. It was a room the size of the entire ground floor of his boarding house, lined from floor to ceiling with thousands of leather-bound books that looked as if they had never been touched. A massive, unlit fireplace dominated one wall, its marble mantelpiece holding a single, severe-looking clock that ticked with a slow, ponderous gravity. A large globe stood in one corner, a world the Sterling family had navigated and conquered, not with armies, but with contracts and cargo ships. It was a room designed to make a man feel small, but Marcus refused to be diminished. He did not sit in the stiff, embroidered chairs that were arranged in a perfect conversationless tableau. He stood in the center of the room, his military bearing a silent, unconscious act of defiance. He looked at the books, at the cold fireplace, at the priceless artifacts, and he saw not a home, but a museum of wealth, a mausoleum of power. He waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The ticking of the clock was the only sound. It was a deliberate, calculated power play. He was the supplicant, the hired help, the problem to be dealt with, and he would be received at her convenience, not his. He understood the strategy perfectly. It was designed to unnerve him, to make him grateful for any attention she might deign to grant him. It did not work. It only hardened his resolve. Finally, the doors opened again, so silently he barely heard them. A woman stood in the doorway. She was tall and slender, dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored black dress. Her silver blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon, and the only jewelry she wore was a single strand of pearls and a pair of small, diamond earrings that caught the dim light. Her face was beautiful, but it was a cold, sculpted beauty, like that of a statue. Her eyes were a pale Arctic blue, and they held no trace of a mother's grief or gratitude. They were the eyes of a hawk, sharp, intelligent, and utterly devoid of sentiment. This was Genevieve Sterling. She closed the doors behind her and walked into the room, her movements graceful and deliberate. She did not approach him. She walked to the massive desk that stood in front of the window, placing its bulk between them, establishing her position of command. "Mr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was low and clear, with a crisp, finishing school accent. It was not the voice of a grateful mother. It was the voice of a chairman of the board addressing an unexpected line item on a budget report. "I am Genevieve Sterling." Marcus simply nodded, waiting. He would not speak first. He would not offer condolences for her chauffeur or inquire about her children. He would meet her on her own terms, on this cold, transactional ground she had chosen. She picked up a single sheet of paper from her desk. It was, he presumed, a copy of the police report. "I've read the trooper's statement," she said, her blue eyes scanning the page, though he knew she had already memorized it. "It says you were walking on a private road in a storm. That seems unusual. What exactly were you doing on my road, Mr. Thorne?" Her first question was not, "How can I thank you?" It was not, "Are you all right?" It was an interrogation, an accusation, veiled in a thin sheath of polite inquiry. She was questioning his very right to exist in her world, the right to walk on a road that, while public, she clearly considered her own private property. In that single question, she revealed everything about herself and about the vast, unbridgeable gulf that separated them. He had saved her children's lives, and her first instinct was to treat him like a trespasser. Marcus held Genevieve Sterling's cold, interrogative gaze without flinching. The weary anger he had felt earlier was now honed to a fine, sharp point. He had not come here to be thanked, but he would not be treated as a suspect. His dignity was the one possession they could not touch. "I was walking back to my rooming house from a job interview, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice quiet but resonant, each word chosen with a deliberate, almost military precision. "The road is the most direct route. I am given to understand that it is a public thoroughfare." His response, calm and factual, seemed to momentarily disrupt her script. She had expected deference, perhaps a fumbling, intimidated explanation. She had not expected this quiet, unyielding self-possession. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, or a grudging respect, passed through her Arctic blue eyes before the mask of cool detachment settled back into place. "I see," she said, placing the police report back on the desk with a dismissive tap of her manicured fingers. The report also states that my children, William and Caroline, were hysterical but unharmed thanks to your intervention. My driver, Mr. Davies, was not so fortunate. She spoke of her chauffeur's death with the same flat, emotionless tone she might use to report a drop in share prices. Davies had been a loyal employee for 20 years, but in the end, he was just that, an employee, a replaceable part in the Sterling machinery. For your actions, she continued, you should be commended. She used the passive voice, you should be commended, as if it were a conclusion reached by some impersonal board of inquiry, rather than a statement of her own personal gratitude. She then reached into a drawer of her desk and took out a long, slim envelope. She slid it across the polished expanse of the mahogany desk. It stopped a few feet from him, an offering left on the altar of their transaction. This, she said, is a token of the Sterling family's appreciation. I trust you will find it adequate. Marcus did not move. He did not look at the envelope. He kept his eyes on her face. He knew what was inside. Money, a neat, clean, anonymous bundle of cash, a payment for services rendered. It was the way her world worked. Every problem, every emotion, every human interaction could be reduced to a number on a ledger. He had performed a task. Now he would be paid. The transaction would be complete. The books balanced. He would take the money and he would disappear from her life, his brief, messy intrusion into her orderly world neatly erased. He thought of the little girl's trembling hand in his. He thought of the boy's terrified face, illuminated by the growing flames. He had not acted for money. He had acted because they were children and they were in danger. To accept the envelope would be to retroactively strip that act of its meaning, to reduce it to a simple commercial exchange. It would be to accept her definition of him as a hired hand, a man whose courage and humanity could be bought and paid for. I don't want your money, Mrs. Sterling, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. This was another deviation from the script. People like him always wanted money. I'm afraid I don't understand, she said, her voice laced with a faint, chilling condescension. Is the amount not satisfactory? The amount is irrelevant, Marcus said. I didn't pull your children from that car for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do. He saw it then, the first genuine, unrehearsed emotion on her face. It was confusion. She truly did not understand. The concept of an action performed without a motive of personal gain was a foreign language to her. In her world, altruism was a myth, a quaint story told to children. Power, leverage, and acquisition were the only realities. She recovered quickly, her mind recalibrating, searching for a new angle, a new motive. If it wasn't money he wanted, then it must be something else, something more. I see, she said again, her tone shifting, becoming more speculative, more dangerous. She leaned forward slightly, her pale eyes narrowing. She was re-evaluating him, seeing him no longer as a common laborer to be paid off, but as a more sophisticated kind of opportunist, a player in a game she understood all too well. So, you are a man of principle, or you would like me to believe you are. What is it then that you do want, Mr. Thorne? A job, a position in one of my husband's companies, a man of your decisiveness could be useful. Is that it? Are you leveraging my children's lives for a career? The insult was breathtaking in its casual cruelty. She had taken his act of decency and twisted it into a piece of cynical, self-serving ambition. He felt the familiar, hot surge of anger in his chest, the same anger he had felt facing down prejudiced officers and condescending employers. He fought it down. To show anger now would be to lose. He had to meet her on this cold, hard ground she had chosen. Mrs. Sterling, he said, his voice taking on an edge of ice that matched her own. You seem to believe that everything in this world is a transaction. You believe that because I saved your children, I must want something from you. A reward, a job, some advantage. It seems impossible for you to imagine that a man might simply act out of a sense of common human decency with no thought of personal gain. He took a step closer to the desk, closing the distance she had put between them. Let me be clear. I want nothing from you. I don't want your money. I don't want your job. I don't want your gratitude. The only thing I want is to be allowed to walk out of this house and continue with my life, a life you cannot possibly comprehend. He paused, letting his words sink in. But since you are so determined to see this as a negotiation, since you are so convinced that I must have a price, let me tell you what I find valuable. He looked around the magnificent, lifeless room, at the unread books, at the priceless artifacts that were symbols of a power so vast it had insulated her from the very concept of humanity. You live in this house, surrounded by all this wealth, but you are a prisoner in it. You sent a chauffeur to fetch me because the idea of coming to my part of town, of speaking to me as an equal, is unthinkable to you. You talk about the death of your employee as if you were reporting a broken piece of furniture. You look at me, a man who saved the two most precious things in your life, and all you can see is a trespasser, an opportunist, a problem to be managed. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the polished surface of her desk, a gesture of quiet, controlled power that mirrored her own. I am a veteran of the United States Army. I fought for this country for 4 years in the Pacific. I have seen men die for ideals that you seem to know nothing about. Ideals like loyalty, sacrifice, and the simple, undeniable fact that one human being has a duty to help another in a moment of crisis, regardless of the color of their skin or the size of their bank account. That, Mrs. Sterling, is my currency. That is what I value. He straightened up. So no, I don't want your money. All I ask is that you take a moment after I leave to consider the fact that your vast fortune has not made you powerful. It has made you poor. Poorer than you could ever imagine. He turned and walked toward the door. He had said his piece. He had defended his honor. He had refused to be defined by her cynical, impoverished view of the world. The transaction was over. Wait! Her voice, sharp and commanding, stopped him as his hand reached the doorknob. He turned. Her face was pale, her composure completely shattered. He had done what no enemy, no business rival, no fawning subordinate had likely ever done. He had held up a mirror to her, and she had not liked the reflection. For the first time, her arctic blue eyes held not a look of command or condescension, but a flicker of something else, something raw and unsettling. It was the look of a woman who had been profoundly, foundationally shaken. You are unlike any man I have ever met, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice a little unsteady. I imagine that's true, he replied. You are correct, she continued, her mind clearly working at a furious pace, trying to process this new, disruptive data. I live in a world of transactions, of leverage, of assets and liabilities. It is the only world I know. She looked at him, her gaze intense, searching. You have something I do not. A clarity, a code of honor that is not subject to market fluctuations. She paused, and the words she spoke next were the last thing he ever expected to hear. That quality, that integrity, is an asset, a rare and valuable one, and I find myself in a situation where I have a desperate need for such an asset. She was not apologizing. She was not admitting defeat. She was reframing the situation, turning his moral victory into a new kind of business proposition. He had something she wanted, something her money could not buy. And like everything else in her life, if she wanted it, she would find a way to acquire it. You said you were looking for a job? She said, her voice regaining its familiar, authoritative tone. I have a proposal for you, Mr. Thorne. A position, not a reward, a contract, for a job that no one else can do. Marcus stared at her, bewildered. He had walked into this house expecting to be dismissed, and he had ended up in a battle for his own soul. Now, having won that battle, he was being offered what? He had no idea what this strange, cold, powerful woman wanted from him, but he knew one thing for certain. His life, which had been a simple, straightforward struggle for survival, was about to become infinitely more complicated. Genevieve Sterling did not invite Marcus to sit. She remained behind her desk, a general outlining a campaign from her command post. The brief, unsettling crack in her composure was gone, replaced by a focused, clinical intensity. She was back in her element, the world of strategy, of problems and solutions. "My husband, Richard Sterling, died 2 years ago," she began, her tone devoid of any emotion. It was a statement of historical fact, like citing a date from a history book. "He built an empire in global shipping, an empire that I now control. It is a complex and often brutal business. My husband was a formidable man. He made a great many enemies." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Since his death, I have been the sole guardian of our 2 children, William and Caroline, and I have become the target of those who wish to see the Sterling Empire dismantled, or at least a piece of it for themselves. The threats are not always overt. They are whispers in boardrooms, sabotaged negotiations, the quiet manipulation of stocks. But lately, they have become more personal." She picked up another piece of paper from her desk, this one a cheap, flimsy sheet, and held it up. Marcus could see the letters, cut from a newspaper and pasted onto the page, a classic, crude method of anonymous communication. "This arrived a week ago," she said, her voice a flat, cold monotone. "It is the 3rd of its kind. It suggests, in rather plain terms, that unless I agree to sell a controlling interest in our Pacific shipping lines to a certain competitor for a fraction of their worth, my children's safety can no longer be guaranteed." The cold, clinical narrative suddenly became sharp and terrifyingly real. The accident. It wasn't an accident. "The police," Marcus said, the word tasting foolish as soon as he said it. Genevieve gave a small, humorless smile. "The police have been investigating," she said, the word dripping with scorn. "They are competent at handling traffic violations and local burglaries. They are out of their depth in a matter like this. The men I'm dealing with are insulated by layers of lawyers and wealth. They are untouchable. To them, the local police are a minor inconvenience." She put the note down. "Mr. Davies, my driver, was a good man, loyal. He had been with the family since before I was married. He was also, I have since learned, a gambling man. He had acquired a significant debt, a debt held by a lending agency that is a subsidiary of the very company that wishes to acquire my shipping lines." The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. "You think he was paid to crash the car?" Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "I think he was coerced," she corrected, a fine distinction that mattered only in the calculus of her cold world. "He was a pawn, a regrettable but necessary sacrifice in their game. The accident was not meant to harm the children. It was meant to be a warning, a demonstration, a way to show me that they can reach my family at any time, in any place, that my walls, my drivers, my security systems are all meaningless." She looked at him then, her gaze direct and penetrating. "And then you appeared, a stranger, a man of no consequence, walking in the rain. And in 5 minutes, you accomplished what my entire system of wealth and protection failed to do. You saved them." She leaned back in her chair, her fingertips pressed together. "I do not believe in coincidences, Mr. Thorne. I believe in assets and opportunities. You are both. You have a skill set that is not for sale in any market I have access to. You are a decorated soldier. You are a man of honor, which paradoxically makes you trustworthy in a way that no hired mercenary ever could be. You are intelligent. You are observant. And you are, if you will forgive my frankness, invisible." "Invisible?" Marcus asked, the word a familiar bitter sting. "Yes," she said without a trace of apology. "In my world, a black man in a simple suit is part of the scenery. You are the waiter, the porter, the chauffeur, people of my class. They do not see you. Their eyes slide right over you. They will say things in front of you they would never say in front of one of their own. You can move through my world in a way that none of my own people can. You can be my eyes and my ears in places I cannot go." The proposal was taking shape, and it was as audacious as it was insulting. She wanted to use his race, the very thing that had been a barrier to him at every turn, as a tool for her own corporate espionage. She wanted to turn his invisibility, the source of his daily humiliation, into her strategic advantage. If Marcus's quiet strength in the face of this indignity has moved you, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue telling these vital stories of resilience and the fight for justice. "Here is my offer," she said, her voice all business. "I want you to become the personal bodyguard and driver for my children. The official title will be household assistant or some such nonsense. The salary will be substantial, more than you could ever hope to earn at any shipping office. She named a figure that made his head spin, a sum that was more than his father had earned in his entire lifetime. You will live here on the estate. You will have your own quarters. You will be given a new wardrobe, a car at your disposal. You will be, for all intents and purposes, a member of my household staff. The offer was a golden cage, a velvet prison. He would have financial security beyond his wildest dreams. But the price would be his freedom, his anonymity, his very self. He would become a sterling possession, another uniform component in her silent, well-oiled machine. But your real job, she continued, her voice dropping lower, will be to protect my children with your life if necessary, and to find out who is behind this, who gave the order. I want a name, and I want proof. Proof that I can use to destroy them, not in a court of law, but in the marketplace, which is the only court that matters. She stood up and walked around the desk, stopping a few feet in front of him. The strategic distance was gone. Now it was personal. I'm offering you a job, Mr. Thorne, a dangerous one, but I am also offering you a chance to fight a war against the same kind of men you have been fighting your whole life. Men who believe their wealth and their power give them the right to treat other human beings as pawns on their chessboard. The bullies, the tyrants, the men who hide behind their lawyers and their balance sheets. You saved my children from a burning car. Now I am asking you to save them from a world of predators. She had done it. With a breathtaking, cynical brilliance, she had reframed her offer. It was no longer a simple job, a lucrative contract. It was a mission. It was a call to arms. She had identified his core principle, his hatred of injustice, his soldier's code of protecting the innocent, and she had turned it into a recruitment pitch. She was not just hiring a bodyguard, she was enlisting a soldier in her private war. Marcus was silent for a long time. His mind was a battlefield of conflicting emotions. He was repulsed by her coldness, by her casual, arrogant manipulation of his race and his principles. She was a user, a queen who moved her pieces without a thought for their own lives. To accept her offer would be to make a deal with the devil, but the devil was telling the truth. The men who were threatening her children were the enemy. They were a more polished, sophisticated version of the prejudiced foreman, the corrupt officer, the sneering banker. They were the men at the very top of the pyramid of injustice. And she was offering him a chance to strike at them, a chance he would never get on his own. And then there were the children. He thought of their small, terrified faces. They were innocent pawns in their parents' brutal games. They had not chosen this life of gilded cages and hidden threats. They deserved to be safe. They deserved a protector. His soldier's oath, the one that was written on his soul, was not just to his country. It was to the helpless, to the innocent. He looked at Genevieve Sterling, at this strange, cold, powerful woman. He did not trust her. He did not like her, but he understood her. She was a predator, yes, but right now, her young were being threatened by a larger, more vicious predator, and the enemy of his enemy could be a temporary and very useful ally. If I do this, he said finally, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, I do it my way. I report to you and only to you. I am not a servant. I am not a member of your staff. I am a specialist, contracted for a specific mission. My sole responsibility is the safety of your children and the identification of the threat. Is that understood? A small, triumphant smile touched her lips. She had won. She had found his price. It was not money. It was respect. Perfectly, Mr. Thorne, she said. She extended a cool, dry hand. It seems we have a deal. Marcus took her hand. The grip was firm, her skin cool. It was not the handshake of a grateful mother, but the handshake of two generals sealing a wartime alliance. He had just enlisted in a private army, in a war with rules he did not yet understand. He had no illusions. He knew that in her world, loyalty was a commodity, and allies were disposable. He knew he was a pawn, but what she didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that sometimes a single, well-placed pawn can change the entire outcome of the game. Marcus Thorne's transition from a room in a boarding house to a suite of rooms on the Sterling estate was as abrupt and disorienting as a battlefield promotion. One moment he was a man struggling to afford his next meal. The next, he was living in a world of polished silver, starched linens, and a silence so profound it felt unnatural. His new quarters were in a discreet wing of the mansion, formerly reserved for visiting dignitaries. They were larger than the entire floor of his previous residence, furnished with dark, heavy antiques, a canopied bed, and a private bathroom with gleaming chrome fixtures and a seemingly endless supply of hot water. It was a level of luxury so far beyond his experience that it felt less like a comfort and more like a gilded cage. He was given a new wardrobe, chosen for him by a tailor who appeared as if by magic, a silent measuring wraith who fitted him for a series of conservative, well-made suits in shades of charcoal and navy, along with the crisp, dark uniform of a chauffeur. He was also given a car, a late-model black Ford, sturdy and unassuming, for the sole purpose of transporting the children. He was being outfitted for a role, given a costume for the part he was to play in the Sterling family's silent, ongoing drama. But the most difficult part of the transition was not the sudden, jarring immersion in wealth. It was the staff. The Sterling estate was run by a small, silent army of servants, each moving through their prescribed roles with a quiet, frictionless efficiency. There was Arthur, the primary chauffeur, the butler, whose name he learned was Jennings, a fleet of maids and cooks and gardeners. They were professionals, their faces impassive masks of courteous deference. But Marcus could feel their eyes on him. He was an anomaly they could not categorize. He was not one of them, not a career servant, but he was also clearly not one of the Sterling's social equals. He was a black man who had been given a position of immense trust and proximity to the family, a position that violated the estate's rigid, unspoken hierarchy. They treated him with a cool, correct politeness, but underneath it, he sensed a current of suspicion and resentment. He was an outsider, a usurper, a man whose story they did not understand and whose motives they did not trust. He was as alone in this palace of 100 rooms as he had been in his single rented room in town. His duties began immediately. His life was now dictated by the rhythms of the children, William and Caroline. He woke before dawn, prepared the car, and drove them to their exclusive private school in the morning. He picked them up in the afternoon. He was a shadow, a constant watchful presence, his eyes always scanning the crowds of other parents and chauffeurs, looking for a face that didn't belong, a car that lingered too long. The children themselves were a puzzle. They were products of their environment, exquisitely dressed, impeccably mannered, and possessed of a quiet, formal gravity that was unsettling in one so young. In the immediate aftermath of the accident, they had clung to him, their trauma making them open and vulnerable. But now, back in the structured, emotionally sterile environment of their home, the walls had gone back up. William, the older of the two, was a miniature version of his late father, serious and reserved. He treated Marcus with a polite, distant courtesy, addressing him as Mr. Thorne, as he had been instructed. Caroline was more expressive, her young face sometimes showing flashes of the fear and confusion that still lingered, but she was learning as she grew older to hide it behind the same mask of cool composure her mother wore. They rarely spoke to him unless spoken to. Their conversations in the back of the car were hushed and formal, about schoolwork, about their riding lessons, about which fork to use at dinner. He was their driver, their protector, a piece of the architecture of their lives, not a person to be engaged with. He did not push. He understood that they were trapped in the same gilded cage he was, their lives as rigidly controlled and emotionally barren as his had become. His job was to guard the cage, not to try and open it. He reported to Genevieve Sterling every evening. Their meetings took place in the same vast, cold library where he had been hired. He would stand before her desk and give a concise, factual report of the day's events, the routes he had taken, the times of arrival and departure, any unusual observations. She would listen in silence, her pale eyes never leaving his face. absorbing the information with a cold, analytical focus. She never asked about his own well-being. She never engaged in small talk. Their relationship was a purely professional military one. He was her field operative, and she was his commanding officer. He found a strange, grim comfort in the clarity of it. There were no false pretenses of friendship, no sentimental illusions. It was a contract, a mission. But in his off hours, when the children were with their tutors or asleep in their beds, Marcus began his real work. He began to investigate. He could not do it openly. He had to use the very invisibility that Genevieve had spoken of. He was the silent, uniformed man who opened doors, who carried packages, who stood waiting in hallways. And as she had predicted, people did not see him. They spoke around him, through him, as if he were a piece of furniture. He started with the staff. He would eat his meals in the cavernous staff kitchen, a world away from the silent formality of the main dining room. Here, among the cooks and the maids, the rigid discipline of the household relaxed slightly. There was gossip, rumors, complaints. He did not participate. He listened. He learned about the family's routines, about the guests who came and went, about the tensions that simmered beneath the placid surface of the Sterling Empire. He learned about Mr. Davies, the dead chauffeur. He was, as Genevieve had said, a gambler, but he was more than that. He was a man who had been deeply in debt to loan sharks with connections to the docks, the very heart of the Sterling shipping business. He had been desperate. A few of the older staff members spoke of how he had changed in the months before his death, how he had become quiet, withdrawn, and perpetually frightened. He was a man with a secret, a man living under a terrible pressure. Marcus also began a methodical, painstaking study of the Sterling's business rival, the man Genevieve suspected was behind the threats, a ruthless, upstart shipping magnate named Silas Croft. Marcus spent hours in the local library, poring over business journals and old newspapers, piecing together a portrait of the man. Croft was new money, a brutish, self-made man who had built his own empire through a series of hostile takeovers and back-alley deals. He was known for his aggressive tactics and his complete lack of scruples. He was exactly the kind of man who would see threatening a man's children as a legitimate business strategy. But suspicion was not proof. Genevieve needed a name, a direct link. Marcus knew he would not find it in a library. He had to get closer. He began to use his role as the children's driver to his advantage. He learned the schedules of the executives at Sterling Shipping's corporate headquarters in nearby Stamford. He would accidentally be in the lobby when they were leaving for lunch. He would be the silent, uniformed man standing by his car near the restaurants where they held their hushed, important conversations. He was a ghost, a shadow, and he was listening. He heard whispers, rumors of a major deal that was about to go sour, talk of a security problem at one of the Sterling piers, and he heard Silas Croft's name, spoken in low, angry tones. He was getting closer, but he was still on the periphery. He needed to get inside. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Genevieve was hosting a major charity gala at the estate, a massive event for the state's most powerful and wealthy citizens. It was a command performance. Everyone who was anyone would be there, and that included Silas Croft. "He will be here tonight," Genevieve told Marcus in their evening briefing. "He would not dare to refuse the invitation. It would be an admission of guilt. He will come, and he will smile, and he will shake my hand, and he will be looking for a way to turn this event to his advantage." She looked at him, her eyes like chips of ice. "I want you to watch him. I want you to be my shadow. Stay out of sight. Listen. I need to know who he speaks to, what he says. I need leverage." That night, Marcus put on the simple dark suit of a household staff member. He was assigned to work the bar, a position that would give him a perfect vantage point of the entire ballroom. The estate was transformed. Hundreds of guests in tuxedos and glittering gowns drifted through the great rooms, their laughter and conversation a brittle, high-pitched symphony against the backdrop of a string quartet. It was a world of breathtaking, suffocating privilege. Marcus moved through the crowd, his tray of drinks a passport that allowed him to go anywhere. He was invisible, just as Genevieve had predicted. Men worth hundreds of millions of dollars would turn to him and say, "Whiskey neat." without ever once looking at his face. He found Silas Croft. He was a big, beefy man with a florid face and small, predatory eyes. He moved through the party with a loud, backslapping bonhomie that failed to conceal the restless, acquisitive energy that radiated from him. Marcus shadowed him for over an hour, listening to snippets of conversation about stocks, about yachts, about politics. Nothing. And then he saw it. Croft was standing near the French doors that led out to the terrace. He was speaking to one of the Sterling family's most trusted senior executives, a man named Henderson. Their conversation was low, intense. Croft slipped a small, plain manila envelope into Henderson's inside jacket pocket. Henderson gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, and then moved away, melting back into the crowd. It was a transaction, quick, silent, and deeply incriminating. Marcus knew with the soldier's unshakable certainty that he had just found the traitor. Henderson was Croft's man on the inside. The envelope could contain anything: cash, documents, instructions. It was the proof Genevieve needed. But then something else happened, something that changed the entire equation. Croft, his business apparently concluded, turned and walked out onto the rain-slicked terrace. He was not alone. A moment later, he was joined by a second figure, a man Marcus recognized instantly from his research. It was a local union boss from the docks, a man named O'Malley, a man known for his brutal, violent tactics and his deep, long-standing hatred of the Sterling family. Croft and O'Malley stood in the shadows, their heads close together, their conversation a low, angry murmur. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but he could see the intent. This was not a business meeting, this was a conspiracy. Suddenly, Croft looked up, his gaze sweeping the ballroom. For a split second, his eyes met Marcus's, and in that moment, Marcus knew he had been seen. The mask of invisibility had slipped. Croft's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition, of suspicion. He didn't know who Marcus was, but he knew he was not just a waiter, he was a witness. Croft said a final curt word to O'Malley, then turned and walked back into the party, his expression a mask of genial indifference. But Marcus knew the game had changed. He was no longer the hunter, he was now the hunted. The moment Silas Croft's eyes met his, the opulent, glittering ballroom transformed from a theater of wealth into a battlefield. The polite chatter, the clinking of glasses, the soft strains of the string quartet, it all faded into a dull, distant roar. All Marcus could hear was the sudden, frantic pounding of his own heart. He had made a critical mistake. In his focus on Croft, he had let his own guard down, had allowed his professional invisibility to falter, and the enemy had seen him. He forced himself to remain calm, to continue his duties as if nothing had happened. He picked up a tray of empty glasses, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He moved away from the terrace doors, melting back into the anonymous river of staff. But he could feel Croft's gaze on him, a heavy, speculative weight. He had gone from being a shadow to being a target. He needed to get a message to Genevieve, to report what he had seen, the payoff to Henderson, the clandestine meeting with the union boss O'Malley. But he couldn't approach her here, not with Croft watching. He had to wait. The party finally began to wind down after midnight. Marcus watched as Croft made his loud, effusive goodbyes, a man playing the role of a genial guest to perfection. But as Croft was leaving, he paused in the grand entrance hall and spoke a few quiet words to Arthur, the Sterling's primary chauffeur, who was coordinating the departing guests' cars. Marcus, who was clearing glasses nearby, saw the exchange. He saw Croft slip a folded bill into Arthur's hand, far more than a simple tip, and he saw the chauffeur give a small, deferential nod. It was another piece of the puzzle, another quiet transaction in a night of them. The corruption within the Sterling household ran deeper than Genevieve knew. It was nearly 2 in the morning before the last guest had departed, and a weary silence had fallen over the great house. Marcus went immediately to the library. Genevieve was there, as he knew she would be. She was standing by the window, a solitary, elegant figure looking out at the dark, rain-swept grounds. The strain of the evening showed in the tense line of her shoulders. "Report," she said, without turning around. Marcus told her everything, his voice a low, urgent monotone. He described the envelope passed to Henderson, the meeting on the terrace with O'Malley, and the final quiet word with the chauffeur, Arthur. As he spoke, he saw her reflection in the dark glass of the window, Her face was a pale, still mask, but he saw her hands clench into tight fists at her sides. When he finished, she turned to face him. Her face was alight with a cold, triumphant fury. "Henderson," she breathed, the name a curse. "He's been with the company for 30 years. My father trusted him completely. The betrayal was a personal wound, far deeper than any business loss. And Arthur, my own driver. The walls have more than ears, it seems. They have hands in my pocket." "Croft saw me," Marcus said, his voice grim. "He knows I was watching him." Genevieve's eyes narrowed, her mind instantly calculating the new risk. "Then you are in danger," she said, her tone flat and matter-of-fact. "He cannot afford to have a witness, especially one he cannot identify or control. He will try to eliminate you." It was not a warning born of concern for his well-being. It was a strategic assessment. He was her primary asset, and that asset was now compromised, in danger of being neutralized. "What are your orders?" Marcus asked, falling back into the familiar language of the military. "My order," she said, her voice like ice, "is for you to become the bait." She saw the look of surprise on his face and held up a hand. "He thinks you are a servant, a minor piece of household staff who saw something he shouldn't have. He will send someone to silence you, someone like O'Malley's thugs from the docks. He will expect you to be a soft target. He will not expect you to be a highly trained combat soldier. We are going to turn his own assumptions against him. We will let him make a move, and we will be ready for it. And when his man is caught, he will talk. He will give us the direct link to Croft we need." The plan was audacious, ruthless, and incredibly dangerous. She was willing to risk his life, to use him as a pawn in a high-stakes gambit to trap a king. He had known she was cold-blooded, but this was a new level of calculation. "And the children?" he asked, his primary concern. "They will be a target as well, a way to get to me. The children will not be leaving this estate until this is over," she said, her voice absolute. "I will inform the school they are ill. Their world will shrink to the confines of these walls. Your only job will be to stay with them, to be their shadow, and to be ready." The next few days were a quiet, nerve-wracking hell. The sprawling, silent mansion, which had once felt like a gilded cage, now felt like a fortress under siege. Marcus did not leave the children's side. He played games with them in their cavernous playroom, read to them from their vast library of books, and walked with them through the manicured, rain-swept gardens, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter, his senses on high alert. The children, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the new underlying tension, were quiet and subdued. William became even more withdrawn, while Caroline, more sensitive to the emotional currents, would often look at him with wide, questioning eyes. "Is something wrong, Mr. Thorne?" she would ask. "Everything is fine," he would lie, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm just making sure you're safe." Genevieve, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of unseen activity. She was on the phone constantly, her conversations with her lawyers and security consultants low and urgent. She was marshalling her own forces, preparing her counterattack. The first move came 2 days after the party. Henderson, the treacherous executive, was summoned to the estate. Marcus saw him arrive, his face pale and nervous. He was shown into the library. An hour later he emerged, his face ashen, his movements those of a man who had been completely and utterly broken. He was escorted from the property by 2 grim-faced men Marcus had never seen before, men who had the unmistakable look of private security. Genevieve had cut out the first piece of the rot. The next day, Arthur, the chauffeur, was quietly dismissed. There was no confrontation, no accusation. He was simply informed that his services were no longer required and was given a severance check so large it was clearly intended as a payment for his future silence. Genevieve was closing the gaps in her defenses, isolating her enemy. Now there was only one loose end: Marcus. He was the witness Croft could not afford. The attack, he knew, would come soon. It came on the 3rd night. The rain had returned, a steady, miserable drizzle that shrouded the estate in a thick, sound-dampening mist. Marcus was in his suite of rooms, which were located on the ground floor, with a set of French doors that opened onto a small private stone patio. The children were asleep upstairs, their rooms guarded by one of Genevieve's new, grim-faced security men. He had been instructed to remain in his room, to present the appearance of a man off duty, an easy target. He was not resting. He was sitting in a darkened room, the only light coming from a sliver of moon that occasionally broke through the clouds. He was wearing dark clothes. On the table beside him lay a heavy cast-iron fireplace poker. It was a poor substitute for a rifle, but it would have to do. He was a soldier again, waiting in an ambush, every nerve ending alive. He heard it just after 2 in the morning. Not a loud noise, but a soft, scraping sound from the patio, the sound of a tool being used to pry open the lock on the French doors. He moved from his chair, his movements silent, cat-like, melting into the deeper shadows near the doorway to the bedroom. The doors swung open silently. A figure slipped into the room, a large, bulky silhouette against the misty gloom of the garden. The man was dressed in dark clothing, a watch cap pulled down low on his forehead. He moved with a practiced criminal stealth, his head turning, scanning the darkened room. In his hand, he held a short, thick piece of lead pipe. He was not here to talk. Marcus waited, his breathing slow and even, his heart a steady, cold drum. He let the man take 2 more steps into the room, away from his escape route. Then he moved. He exploded from the shadows, not with a roar, but with a silent, blinding speed. The intruder, who had been expecting a sleeping, unsuspecting servant, had no time to react. Marcus's first move was not to attack, but to disarm. He brought the heavy fireplace poker down in a short, brutal arc, not on the man's head, but on his wrist. There was a sickening crunch of bone and a strangled cry of pain. The lead pipe clattered to the floor. The man staggered back, clutching his shattered wrist, his face a mask of shock and agony. He had walked into a trap, and the bait had teeth. Before the man could recover, before he could even scream, Marcus was on him. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest, propelling him backward across the room, and slammed him against the far wall. The impact knocked the wind from the man's lungs with a loud, whooshing gasp. Marcus pressed the end of the poker against the man's throat, pinning him to the wall, cutting off his air. The man's eyes were wide with terror, the arrogant confidence of a predator replaced by the panicked fear of the prey. He was big and strong, a dockside brawler, but he was no match for a man who had survived hand-to-hand combat in the pitch-black jungles of the Pacific. "Who sent you?" Marcus asked, his voice a low, deadly whisper, the poker pressing just hard enough to make the point. The man gurgled, unable to speak. Marcus eased the pressure slightly. "I will ask you one more time. Who sent you?" "O'Malley," the man choked out, the name a panicked gasp. "Croft's man. He sent me." It was the confession, the direct link, the proof. At that moment, the lights in the room flashed on, flooding the scene in a brilliant, merciless glare. 2 of Genevieve's security men stood in the doorway, their guns drawn, their faces hard and professional. And behind them, standing in a silk dressing gown, her face a mask of cold, triumphant satisfaction, was Genevieve Sterling. She had been listening. She had been waiting just outside the door, using him as the bait, just as she had promised. She had risked his life to get what she wanted, and now she had it. She looked at the terrified, whimpering thug pinned to her wall, and then she looked at Marcus, his face a grim mask of controlled violence. And for the first time, he saw a flicker of something new in her eyes. It was not gratitude, it was not respect, it was fear. She had enlisted a soldier for her private war, and she was only now beginning to understand the true nature of the weapon she had just unleashed. The aftermath of the attack was a swift and silent changing of the guard. The thug from the docks, his will broken along with his wrist, was bundled away by Genevieve's security men. He disappeared into the clandestine legal machinery of the Sterling Empire, a place of private interrogations and deals made in rooms without windows. Marcus knew he would never see the man again. He had served his purpose. He had provided the name, the link, the weapon Genevieve needed to finally go on the offensive. In the immediate wake of the confrontation, the atmosphere in the mansion shifted. The cold, professional distance between Marcus and Genevieve was now charged with a new, unspoken current. The fear he had seen in her eyes was not the fear of a woman in danger, but the fear of a master who has come to realize her tool is far more powerful and less controllable than she had imagined. She had hired a guard dog and had discovered she had a wolf on a leash. Their evening briefings in the library took on a new tone. She was no longer just his commanding officer, issuing orders. There was a new, grudging respect in her voice, the respect one professional gives to another. She began to ask for his opinion, for his strategic assessment. "Croft will know his man has failed," she said a day after the attack, her voice a low, analytical hum. "He will know we have O'Malley's name. He will expect a legal attack, a call to the police, a lawsuit. It is what he is prepared for. It is what he knows how to fight." "And that's not what you're going to do," Marcus stated, knowing her mind. "No," she said, a thin, predatory smile touching her lips for the first time. "Calling the police would create a public scandal. It would drag the sterling name through the mud. My husband's enemies on the board would use it as an excuse to question my leadership. We are not going to fight this in a courtroom. We are going to fight it in the dark, where he lives." Her plan, as she outlined it, was a masterpiece of corporate warfare, as brutal and elegant as a stiletto blade. She was not interested in putting Croft in jail. She was interested in destroying him. She would use the confession from O'Malley's man not as evidence for the police, but as leverage. Her lawyers were already using it to persuade the dockworkers' union to abandon their alliance with Croft, threatening to expose O'Malley's criminal activities. Without the union's muscle, Croft's ability to disrupt her shipping operations would be crippled. Simultaneously, she was preparing a financial assault. Using the information Henderson had provided under duress before his resignation, she was identifying the weak points in Croft's own empire, the over-leveraged loans, the precarious business deals. She was going to initiate a hostile takeover, not of his primary company, but of the smaller banks and holding companies that kept him afloat. She was going to cut off his credit, strangle his cash flow, and leave his corporate carcass for the vultures to pick over. It was a campaign that would take weeks, perhaps months, to execute, and during that time, the danger to the children and to Marcus was at its peak. Croft, a cornered animal, would be at his most unpredictable and most vicious. Life on the estate became a state of high-alert lockdown. The children's world shrank even further. Their tutors now came to the house. Their riding lessons were suspended. Their only access to the outside world was the vast, manicured grounds of the estate, and they could only go there with Marcus at their side. The constant, enforced proximity began to change the dynamic between Marcus and the children. He was no longer just the silent, uniformed man who drove them to school. He was their constant companion, their jailer, and their only link to a world outside their mother's war. William, the quiet, serious boy, began to open up to him in small, hesitant ways. He was a lonely child, raised in a world of adults, starved for a genuine, uncomplicated male presence. He would ask Marcus questions, not about the danger they were in, which was an unspoken taboo, but about his life, about the army, about the places he had seen. Marcus, in turn, found himself speaking of his past in a way he never had before. He told William not the stories of horror and bloodshed, but the stories of camaraderie, of the strange, beautiful landscapes of the Pacific Islands, of the quiet pride of being a soldier. He taught him how to tie knots, how to read a compass, the small practical skills of a soldier's life. He was giving the boy a glimpse of a world of honor and duty that was a universe away from the cynical, transactional world of his father's business. Caroline, the little girl, was more direct. She did not have her brother's reserve. She had seen him fight. She had seen him, a quiet gentleman, transform into a figure of terrifying, protective power. She was not afraid of him. She was in awe of him. She would follow him around the gardens, her small hand often slipping into his, a simple, trusting gesture that squeezed his heart. "Are you our friend, Mr. Thorne?" she asked him one afternoon, as they sat on a stone bench by the pond. "I am your protector, Caroline," he answered carefully. "But are you our friend?" she insisted, her gaze direct and unwavering. Marcus looked at her small, earnest face, a face that was so much like her mother's, yet held a warmth and an innocence that Genevieve had long since lost. "Yes, Caroline," he said, the word feeling both true and dangerous. "I am." He was crossing a line he knew Genevieve would not approve of. He was supposed to be a guard, an employee, a tool. He was not supposed to be a friend, a mentor, a father figure. But the children were so starved for genuine human connection that they reached for him, and he, in his own loneliness, could not help but reach back. Genevieve observed this growing bond with a cool, unreadable expression. She saw the way her children looked at him, the way they sought his company. A part of her, the strategist, recognized his value. He had their absolute trust, which made him an even more effective protector. But another part of her, the mother, the possessive queen of her own small kingdom, saw it as a threat. He was encroaching on her territory, forging an emotional bond with her children that she herself had never been able to create. She had hired him to be a shield, but he was becoming something more, something she had not anticipated and did not know how to control. The tension between them, the unspoken power struggle, came to a head one evening. Marcus was in the library, giving his nightly report. Genevieve was more distracted than usual, her mind clearly on the final stages of her campaign against Croft. "The board of United Trust Bank is meeting tomorrow," she said, more to herself than to him. "My people have acquired a controlling interest. By noon, Croft's primary line of credit will be terminated. It's the final move. He will be finished. He'll be desperate," Marcus said, his voice grim. "A desperate man is a dangerous one. We need to double the security on the grounds tonight." She waved a dismissive hand. "It's already been handled. The estate is sealed." She looked at him, her eyes cool. "Your concern for the children is admirable, Mr. Thorne, but they are my children. I am their mother. I will be the one to decide what is necessary for their protection." The rebuke was subtle but clear. He was overstepping his bounds. He was the hired help, and he was to remember his place. Before he could respond, the library doors burst open. It was Caroline, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. She was in her nightgown. "Mama!" she cried. "It's William! He's gone!" Genevieve's face went white. She was on her feet in an instant. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, gone?" "His bed is empty," Caroline sobbed, "and the window in his room is open." Marcus didn't wait for an order. He was already moving, his mind a blur of tactical calculations. He ran up the grand staircase, taking the steps two at a time, Genevieve and a panicked Caroline close behind him. William's room was on the second floor. As Caroline had said, the bed was empty, the sheets thrown back. A magnificent, ancient oak tree grew just outside the window, its thick, sturdy branches a natural ladder leading down to the dark, rain-soaked lawn below. On the boy's nightstand was a hastily scrawled note. "I have to help. I am going to the docks. I know a secret way in. I will find proof against Mr. Croft. I will be a hero like father." The note was a child's fantasy, a foolish, romantic and catastrophically dangerous act, fueled by Marcus's stories of military courage and a desperate childish need to earn his dead father's approval and his living mother's attention. William had embarked on his own secret mission. He had gone to the one place in the world where he would be most vulnerable, the heart of O'Malley's and Croft's territory. For the first time since he had met her, Marcus saw Genevieve Sterling completely undone. The cold, calculating mask was gone, replaced by the raw, primal terror of a mother who has lost a child. She sank onto the edge of her son's bed, a hand to her mouth, a low, keening sound of pure agony escaping her lips. Marcus did not have time for her grief. He had to act. "How long has he been gone?" he snapped at Caroline. "I don't know," the girl sobbed. "Maybe an hour." An hour. Croft and O'Malley would have him by now. They would use him as their final desperate bargaining chip. "Call the police," Genevieve whispered, her voice a broken thread. "No," Marcus said, his voice a low, hard command that cut through her panic. "The police will be too slow. They will set up roadblocks, make a lot of noise. Croft will know we are coming. He will panic, and he might hurt the boy." He looked at her, his gaze intense, forcing her to meet his eyes, to pull herself together. "There is only one way to get him back. We do this my way, quietly, no police, just me." She stared at him, her face a mess of tears and terror. All her wealth, all her power, all her lawyers and security guards were useless now. She had only one asset left, the quiet, invisible man who had become her children's friend. In that moment, she was not his employer. She was a supplicant. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A car," he said, "the fastest one you have, and a map of the docks. And you are going to stay here by this phone, and you are going to do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. Is that understood?" She nodded, her eyes wide. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The soldier was now in command. The 20-mile drive to the Stamford docks was a high-speed, laser-focused exercise in controlled fury. Marcus was behind the wheel of Genevieve's personal car, a Jaguar, a sleek, powerful machine that ate up the wet, empty roads. The world outside the windows was a blur of darkness and streaking lights, but inside his mind, everything was preternaturally clear. He was a soldier on a mission again, a rescue operation deep in enemy territory, and the cold, familiar calm of the battlefield had settled over him. There was no room for fear, no time for doubt. There was only the objective: find the boy. He had a map of the Sterling shipping piers spread on the passenger seat beside him, a complex diagram of warehouses, loading cranes, and railway spurs. William's note had been tragically specific. He had mentioned a secret way in, a detail that had sparked a memory in Genevieve's panicked mind. It was an old, disused storm drain that ran from the woods at the edge of the property and emptied out near Pier 4, a place the children had discovered years ago during a supervised and highly sanitized tour of their father's empire. It was a child's hiding place, a secret passage, and it was leading William directly into the heart of the Viper's nest. Pier 4, Genevieve had informed him, was leased not to one of Sterling's own companies, but to a third-party logistics firm that was a known front for Silas Croft's less savory operations. Marcus drove not to the main entrance of the sprawling port, which would be guarded, but to a deserted access road that bordered the woods. He killed the engine and the headlights a quarter of a mile away, the sudden silence broken only by the distant hum of the port and the lonely cry of a gull. He got out of the car, the damp, salty air, a familiar, invigorating slap in the face. He was dressed in the dark, functional clothes he had insisted on, his chauffeur's uniform discarded. He had no weapon, save for a heavy, industrial flashlight and the knife he always carried, a relic of his time in the army. He moved into the woods, his footsteps silent on the damp earth. The skills he had learned in the jungles of the Pacific came back to him as if he had never left. He moved through the darkness with a predator's grace, his senses alive, reading the terrain, listening to the sounds of the night. He found the storm drain exactly where the map indicated. The iron grate that covered it had been pulled aside. A set of small, muddy footprints led into the black, gaping maw. The boy had been here. He entered the drain, crouching low. The pipe was narrow and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of stagnant water and decay. He moved as quickly as he could, his flashlight beam cutting a sharp, lonely circle in the oppressive darkness. After 100 yards, he saw a faint square of grey light ahead, the end of the pipe. He emerged, silent as a shadow, into the heart of the docks. He was in a narrow, trash-strewn alley between two massive corrugated metal warehouses. The air here was thick with the smells of diesel fuel, fish, and creosote. The night was alive with the sounds of the port, the groan of a distant foghorn, the clang of metal on metal, the rumble of a shunting locomotive. Pier 4, Warehouse B. He knew where he had to go. He moved through the labyrinth of shipping containers and railway cars, a ghost in the industrial landscape. He saw a few dock workers, burly, shadowy figures moving under the harsh glare of the security lights, but he stayed in the shadows, his dark clothes making him nearly invisible. He found Warehouse B. It was a vast, dark, silent building, its windows high and grimy. A single bare bulb burned over a side entrance. Two men stood by the door, smoking cigarettes. their broad shoulders and low-slung postures marking them as O'Malley's men. They were guards. William was inside. Marcus circled the building, searching for another way in. He found it on the far side, a series of rusted metal rungs leading up to the roof, an old fire access ladder. He climbed, his movements swift and sure. From the roof he had a vantage point. He crept to a grimy skylight and peered down. The interior of the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, filled with stacked crates and the hulking, silent shapes of forklifts and machinery. And in the center of the vast, empty floor, in a pool of harsh, direct light from an overhead lamp, he saw them. William was tied to a chair, his small body looking lost and fragile in the immense space. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a terror that had finally, mercifully, been replaced by a kind of stunned, silent shock. Standing over him was O'Malley, the union boss, a brutal, menacing figure, and a few feet away, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, was Silas Croft. Marcus could not hear their words, but he could read the scene. Croft was on the telephone, his face a mask of furious desperation. He was making his final move, his last desperate gambit. He was calling Genevieve. The sound of his own phone, a special device Genevieve had given him, vibrated in his pocket. He answered it. "Talk to me," he said, his voice a low whisper. "It's him," Genevieve's voice came through, strained and tight with fear. "He has William. He wants me to sign over the Pacific lines. He's given me 1 hour. He says if I call the police, he'll kill him." "Keep him on the phone," Marcus ordered, his mind racing. "Stall him. Argue with him. Tell him you need to get your lawyers on the line. I need 10 minutes. 10 minutes for what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "To end this," he said, and disconnected the call. He had no time for a frontal assault. The 2 guards at the door, plus O'Malley and Croft inside. The odds were 4 to 1, and they would be armed. And the boy was in the middle of it all. He needed a diversion, a way to create chaos. His eyes scanned the warehouse floor below. He saw the stacked crates, the machinery, and he saw the electrical junction box on the far wall, a tangle of thick, heavy cables leading up to the overhead lights. An idea, desperate and dangerous, took shape. He crept across the roof to the other side of the building, directly above the junction box. He took out his knife. He found the main power conduit, a cable as thick as his wrist. He began to saw at the thick rubber insulation, exposing the copper wires within. Then, using a discarded piece of metal he found on the roof as a conductor, he did something incredibly stupid and incredibly effective. He shorted the main circuit. There was a brilliant blue-white flash, a shower of sparks, and a sound like a cannon shot. Then, the entire warehouse and a good portion of the surrounding pier was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. For a moment, there was only stunned silence from below. It was followed by shouts of confusion and alarm. The 2 guards from the door would be coming inside, trying to figure out what had happened. This was his chance. He sprinted back across the roof to the first skylight, the one directly above the center of the room. He took the heavy flashlight from his belt and, using it as a hammer, he smashed the glass. He didn't wait for the shards to fall. He swung himself through the opening, dropping the 20 feet to the concrete floor below, his body absorbing the impact with a soldier's practiced roll. He landed in the heart of the chaos. The men below were disoriented, blinded by the sudden darkness. He could hear them shouting, bumping into things, but he had seen the layout of the room. He knew where the boy was. He moved through the darkness, silent and invisible, a predator in his natural element. He reached the chair where William was tied. He sliced through the ropes with 2 quick, clean strokes of his knife. "It's me," he whispered into the boy's ear. "Stay right behind me. Don't make a sound." He pulled the boy with him, melting back into the deeper shadows at the edge of the vast room, near a stack of massive wooden crates. From the darkness, they heard Croft's voice, a panicked, furious roar. "Find the lights! Find him! He's in here somewhere." Flashlight beams began to cut through the darkness, erratic, searching beams. Marcus knew they had only a few minutes before they were found. He had to get the boy out, but the main entrance was blocked. He looked at the massive crates they were hiding behind. They were stamped with the name of a sterling shipping subsidiary. He knew what would be inside: heavy machinery, bound for export. But between the crates, he saw a narrow gap, and beyond it the faint outline of a loading bay door, a possible way out. "Stay here," he whispered to William, pushing him deeper into the shadows. "I'll be back." He had to create a second diversion, something to draw them away from this side of the warehouse. He saw a forklift, its keys still in the ignition. He crept to it, silent as a wraith. He climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The diesel engine roared to life, its sudden deafening sound an earthquake in the silent darkness. He switched on the headlights, their bright beams pinning one of O'Malley's men in a moment of shocked blindness. Marcus put the machine in gear and aimed it at a massive stack of empty oil drums on the far side of the warehouse. He pushed the accelerator to the floor. The forklift surged forward. Just before it reached the wall, he jumped, rolling away into the darkness. The crash was apocalyptic. The forklift slammed into the oil drums, which collapsed with a deafening, thunderous clang, a cascade of metal that echoed through the warehouse like an artillery barrage. The flashlight beams all swung in that direction, the men running toward the sound, toward the perceived threat. It was the opening he needed. He sprinted back to William, grabbed his hand, and pulled him toward the loading bay door. It was secured by a simple, heavy iron bar. With a grunt of effort, he lifted it and pushed the heavy door up, just enough for them to slide under. They were outside, in the cool, damp night air. They were not safe yet. He could hear shouting from inside the warehouse as Croft and his men realized they had been tricked. He pulled William with him and they ran, not toward the main road, but deeper into the labyrinth of the docks, toward the water's edge. They found refuge in the shadow of a massive loading crane, their chests heaving, their breath coming in ragged gasps. In the distance, they could hear the sound of approaching sirens, the sound Genevieve had finally been cleared to make. The police were coming. The game was over. William, who had been running on pure adrenaline, finally collapsed, his small body trembling. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, the words a choked, guilty whisper. "I was just trying to help. I was trying to be like you." Marcus knelt in front of him, putting his hands on the boy's small, shaking shoulders. "Listen to me, William," he said, his voice low and firm, but not unkind. "Being a hero isn't about running into danger. It's about having the courage to protect the people you love. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay safe and trust the people who are trying to protect you." He pulled the boy into a hug, a gesture of comfort and forgiveness. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." As the first police cars screeched onto the pier, their flashing lights turning the night into a chaotic, strobing nightmare, Marcus looked out across the dark, oily water. He had done it. He had fulfilled his contract. He had saved the boy. He had won Genevieve Sterling's private war. But as he held her trembling son in his arms, he knew that something had profoundly and irrevocably changed. He was no longer just a hired hand, a temporary asset. He had become a part of this strange, broken family story, and he had a sudden, chilling premonition that his own story was now so deeply entangled with theirs that he might never be able to get free. The aftermath of the warehouse raid was a swift and brutal victory for Genevieve Sterling. With Silas Croft and the union boss O'Malley caught red-handed in a kidnapping plot, their empires crumbled overnight. The confession from O'Malley's captured thug, combined with the testimony of a terrified but cooperative William Sterling, was more than enough. But Genevieve, true to her word, did not fight her battle in the courtroom. The arrests were a mere formality, the public face of her victory. Her real war was won in the silent, wood-paneled boardrooms and the hushed back offices of Wall Street. Armed with irrefutable proof of Croft's criminal activities, she systematically dismantled his business. She used the scandal to trigger clauses in his loan agreements, calling in debts and forcing him into bankruptcy. She absorbed his most valuable shipping routes and assets into her own company for pennies on the dollar. It was not justice, it was a corporate annihilation, a predator consuming its weakened rival. Within a month, the name Silas Croft had vanished from the pages of the financial journals, his empire reduced to a footnote in the history of the Sterling dynasty. For Marcus, the return to the Sterling estate was a return to a world that had been fundamentally altered. He was no longer just an employee, a protector. He was a hero, a savior, the man who had single-handedly brought the Sterling's enemies to their knees. The change was most palpable in the attitude of the staff. The suspicion and resentment were gone, replaced by a mixture of awe, respect, and a healthy dose of fear. He was no longer the invisible man. He was Mrs. Sterling's right hand, a man with an unseen but undeniable power. The children, William and Caroline, now looked at him with an open and uncomplicated adoration. He was the hero from their own real-life adventure story, the man who had dropped from the ceiling and saved them from the villains. The formal Mr. Thorne was replaced by a familiar Marcus. They sought his company constantly, their childish chatter now filled with a genuine warmth and affection. He had become the one stable, trustworthy presence in their chaotic, emotionally barren lives. But it was the change in Genevieve that was the most profound and unsettling. The cold, transactional wall between them had been shattered by the night at the warehouse. She had been forced to rely on him, to place the life of her son in his hands, and that act of forced dependency had created a new, complex, and dangerous intimacy between them. Her gratitude was not expressed in words of thanks or emotional displays. That was not her way. It was expressed in a new kind of partnership. She no longer summoned him to the library for formal briefings. Instead, she would ask him to join her for a quiet dinner in her private study, the two of them eating in a comfortable silence, a map of her global shipping routes spread on the table between them. She began to ask for his counsel, not just on matters of security, but on business. She valued his judgment, his soldier's ability to cut through the noise and see the essential facts of a situation, his unwavering moral compass that was so alien to her own world. "You see things so clearly, Marcus," she said one evening as they discussed a particularly thorny labor dispute in one of her foreign ports. "You see the men, not just the numbers. It is a valuable perspective." He was becoming her consigliere, her most trusted advisor. The golden cage was becoming more comfortable, its bars wrapped in velvet. She increased his salary to a truly astronomical sum. She gave him unlimited access to the Sterling's resources. She was binding him to her, not with a contract, but with a silken cord of trust, responsibility, and wealth. Marcus was not a fool. He knew what was happening. He was being absorbed into the Sterling Empire, his own identity, his own dreams, slowly being subsumed by hers. He had come to this place as a man looking for a simple job, a way to survive. Now he was a key player in a world of unimaginable power and wealth, but he felt a growing unease, a sense that he was losing himself. He had won her war, but he was in danger of becoming a permanent casualty of her peace. He tried to maintain his distance, to remind himself that he was an employee, not a member of the family, but the lines were becoming increasingly blurred. The children treated him like an uncle. The staff treated him like a regent. And Genevieve treated him like a possession she had come to value above all others. The final, unspoken line was crossed one night about a month after the raid. It was late. The children were asleep. He was in his rooms reading when there was a soft knock on his door. It was Genevieve. She was not dressed in her usual severe, elegant attire. She was wearing a simple silk dressing gown, her silver blonde hair unpinned and falling softly around her shoulders. She looked younger, more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. In her hand, she held a snifter of brandy. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice a little unsteady. He stepped aside and let her in. She walked to the window and stood for a long moment, looking out at the dark, silent grounds. "The house is so quiet now," she said, her voice a low murmur. "Since Richard died, the silence has been deafening." She turned to face him. "You have filled this house with a sense of safety I had forgotten was possible." She took a step closer. "I have spent my entire life surrounded by men who wanted something from me. My father, my husband, my business rivals. They all wanted my money, my power, my name." She looked at him, her pale blue eyes shining with an intensity he had never seen before. "You are the only man I have ever met who wanted nothing. And in wanting nothing, you have become indispensable." She was standing very close to him now. He could smell the faint, expensive scent of her perfume, the warm, human scent of her skin. He knew what was happening. She was making a new proposal, a new, unspoken offer. He was not just to be her advisor, her protector. She wanted him to be her consort, her partner, the man who would stand beside her, a symbol of her power and his loyalty. It was the final acquisition, the ultimate merger. He looked at her, at this beautiful, powerful, and profoundly lonely woman. He understood her. He even, in a strange way, pitied her. She was trying to fill the vast, empty space in her life with the only tool she knew how to use: power. She was trying to acquire him, to own his loyalty, his strength, his very soul, and in that moment, he knew he had to leave. To stay would be to surrender the last piece of himself. He would become a creature of her world, a kept man, his honor and his independence slowly eroding away until he was nothing more than another one of her priceless, lifeless possessions. He had not fought his way through a world of prejudice and poverty to end up as a pampered prisoner in a gilded cage. "Genevieve," he said, his voice gentle but firm, using her first name for the first time, "you have given me a great deal. You have shown me a world I never knew existed, and I am grateful for the trust you have placed in me." He took a step back, creating a small but unbridgeable space between them. "But this is not my world. My work here is done. I have fulfilled my contract. The children are safe. Your enemies are gone. It's time for me to go." Her face froze. The vulnerability, the brief, fleeting glimpse of the woman behind the mask, vanished, replaced by a look of cold, stunned disbelief. She had offered him everything: wealth, power, herself, and he was refusing. It was an outcome her mind could not process. "Go," she said, the word a small, sharp sliver of ice. "Go where? Back to your rooming house? To your life of nothing?" "Back to my own life," he corrected her gently. "A life where I can build something that is mine. You have your empire to run. I have my own small house to build." Her disbelief curdled into a cold, quiet fury. She had been rejected. The one asset she could not acquire, the one man her power could not hold, was walking away. "I see," she said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "I have made you, Mr. Thorne. I took you from nothing and gave you everything, and this is how you repay me, with ingratitude." "This isn't about gratitude," he said, his voice still calm. "This is about freedom, yours and mine." He knew that leaving would not be easy. She would not make it so. She would see his departure not as a personal choice, but as a betrayal, a final act of insubordination. He had won her war, but he now faced one last, difficult battle, the battle to win his own peace. He walked with her to the door of his room. "The children will be fine," he said. "You are a strong woman, Genevieve. Stronger than you know. You don't need a shield. You just need to learn how to be a mother." He opened the door for her. She stood for a long moment in the hallway, her face an unreadable mask of pride and wounded anger. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, a solitary, regal figure disappearing down the long, silent corridor. The next morning, Marcus packed his single bag. He put on the simple, sturdy clothes he had arrived in. He went to say goodbye to the children, their faces crumpled with a genuine, heartbreaking sorrow. He knelt before them and told them that he had to go, but that he would never forget them, and that they were two of the bravest people he had ever known. He walked out of the grand front door of the Sterling mansion for the last time. There was no car waiting for him. There was no chauffeur to see him off. He had been erased from the Sterling world as quickly and as efficiently as he had been brought into it. He walked down the long, winding driveway, the crushed white stone crunching under his feet. He did not look back. He was walking away from a life of unimaginable wealth and power, a life most men would have killed for. He had no job. He had no prospects. He had only the small amount of money he had saved and his own 2 hands. But as he walked through the great iron gates and back onto the public road, he felt a sense of liberation so profound it was like taking his first breath after a long, deep dive. He was not a hero. He was not a consort. He was just Marcus Thorne, a free man. And for the first time in a very long time, the road ahead, uncertain and difficult as it was, belonged only to him. Your generous support through Super Thanks ensures that the fire of these powerful memories will never be extinguished. Thank you.